robotics. And when it came to the school, what I noticed was there weren't any robotics teams in the school, although there were all the FX robotics kits in classes. So what I did was, logically, I made the team, and that's why the team exists in the school. And the reason I love FX robotics so much is that you get all these challenges, all these new games every single year, and you gotta build a new robot for less than like 10 months, give or take, and you gotta make it as best as you can. Not only the lightest, the fastest, the strongest, but also you gotta have control, you gotta have all the engineering knowledges to present, and obviously you gotta win the competition. So the thing was that not everybody started robotics in third grade, right? No, but I loved robotics so much, and this is me on 10th grade, where I went to Worlds, where I got a fortunate chance to win the nationals and got to represent my own country, and it was great because Mr. Bennett, Michelle, and some of the seniors you might notice, like recognize, but the thing was we did it with very limited supplies because it was the first year of the team, and I was very proud. And on the second year of robotics, we also got to get to Worlds again, and that was also a very fortunate event. And this meant that we were very sufficient in robotics. I loved what I did. And the thing was, this question: how can I use my passion to constructively engage with the community? Engaging with the community, I obviously wanted to engage with the robotics community because I'm an engineering guy. What else do I do? I put like 6 hours per week in robotics, so that was a very obvious choice. And using my passion was also robotics. So obviously this led to asking this single question: if I ask you to build this robot in 10 months, can you build this robot? And the most of you would say no, because this looks so complicated. This without any instructions or anything, if you gotta creatively build a single robot that would be able to compete at a national, international level, that would be a very, very hard challenge. And that was the challenge for all the newly joining students too, like the freshmen that recently joined on this year. And the thing was, this was a problem for all the teams. So for the freshmen, we might have looked like a senior engineer, like we knew everything. I knew everything, and maybe not this handsome, but all with all of this technicality. But for the newly joining teammates, they didn't know anything, because for some of the teammates I felt was some of them I had to teach how to even tighten a bolt in them, and that was a very basic thing for robotics. So personally, it was a very big surprise for me. So, and then that was the point where it hit me. How could we resolve the intellectual difference in the robotics team of our school? And I started researching for other teams in other schools, because this is a ongoing problem in every robotics, right? So what I found was Purdue SigBots. They are a university team at Purdue University. Purdue University is a top 5 engineering school, which they're very, very good at robotics. And you can see from their faces they're kind of good, the pasties and the hairline, the glasses and everything. And they're very good because they won several world championships, and they were the one that leads the whole robotics community with information, sharing the information they had, not only keeping them. So, and what they did was make this kind of website where they made Purdue SigBots. They made a Wikipedia of every single knowledge of robotics. Like, I know the gear ratio, and gear ratios might be hard for new students, so they wrote everything down, the gear ratio, how to calculate it, and how does the torque distribute. And this looked so interesting to me because this was approachable by anyone who has internet access, and this has basically everything that you need for doing robotics, right? So this was my plan. First, create a guide for the students to follow, and step 2, lessons for the new students. And step 3, create a cycle of information where each year we add on to the previous year. And step 4, maybe strongest team in the nation, or I don't know, internationally, the strongest team. And this is where I started off. Ignore the design. I'm an engineering kid, so I don't know much about design, but it had everything in it. Robotics Kickstarter kit, where I had building a robot. Obviously, robot, you gotta build stuff. Programming, because you gotta make your robot move, right? The design cycle, because you gotta repeat the cycle of building, prototyping, testing it, and then looking at the problem again, and then engineering notebook, because this is where they grade a lot in the competition itself. And lastly, strategy, because you gotta obviously drive your robot to success, right? So, but this was there was a bit of a problem. First, not visually appealing, as you can see here. And it was harder to use because as it was a document, it wasn't for everybody, right? They're not gonna look at the paper while they're building a robot. And they had almost no addability. And the reasonable choice for me was to look at the Purdue SIGBOT's Wikipedia and benchmark it. And that's why I built a website of SJFX Robotics. And this was a very good solution because not only you had everything with very organized charts, but you could access the websites with the people who has access, and then you could add on to the information that you think that the newly joining students are very weak on. And this was very simple. This is not everything that you needed for robotics, but you had gears, tightening bolts and nuts. That's where built, and and everything basically you needed for almost everything you needed for basic robotics. And although I couldn't make the lessons because of time constraints, I could prove that this was pretty decent for effectiveness because we did pretty good on the competition this year. My team, because I'm in it, we got second place. We got 8-0-0, which means we won every match. And the next team was here, 12th place, Pickles. And they weren't very, not that big of a good team, but they went up to 12th place in the nationals, which they have about 60 to 80 teams. So I feel like that was pretty, that's pretty darn good for high school student. And yeah, and I also did a survey for the robotics student in the robotics class, and most of the students out of 22, all of the students went above a 4 out of 7, and most of the students voted a 7 for how helpful this guide was because they could use this during class, during building robotics, or they could just use it purely as a study material before you join the team. And yeah, I feel like I was very good on this. And with our interview with Mr. Bennett, he said this was a very constructive, very good cycle of knowledge, and I really felt really proud for that. And because this was a project that really put my mind into it, put my heart into it, because robotics was everything I built And so I was really happy that I put a long-lasting impact because, not everybody can make that much of an impact. I also made the team, but I also made it last longer and sustainable. And also, I created a positive cycle for students to add on. And if there's something that's not really into always the team leaders can add on to that knowledge. If they don't know about motors, they can add on onto the motor section. And lastly, I can leave the school happily because the one thing that I worried was when I leave that the team would fall and everybody would start from the beginning. And and I feel like this was a thing that I could also support during college season, and I also trust the people here, so I was really happy about that. And before I end the presentation, I wanted to show you my guidebook, and I can add the big headers and everything.